Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you guys had a good lunch. My name is Catherine Atterbury. I am the General Counsel of Kaiko, also known as Challenger Deep. We are a market data provider of digital assets data. While market data is our current game, we are, the long game for us is blockchain. It's smart contracts. It's, putting data onto the blockchain to create various use cases. We believe that, the future of pretty much everything belongs on the blockchain. So I'm very happy to be here to discuss the recent publication from the White House, the Framework for Responsible Development of Digital Assets. The expert today is Alan Cohn. I'll let you introduce yourself, Alan.
Sure. Hi. I'm Alan Cohn. I'm the co-chair of the blockchain and cryptocurrency practice at Steptoe and Johnson, a law firm based out of Washington, D.C. I was formerly an assistant secretary at the Department of Homeland Security, working on a range of different issues, including an introduction to cryptocurrency at that point.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with the obvious question, which is, what's this framework? And I guess it's three questions. What's this framework? What does it say? And what does it do?
So it's an interesting question because, of course, there's an announcement of a framework, but then there's no document that says this is the framework for digital assets. So really what the framework is, it's a follow-on from the March 9th executive order on digital assets, combined with 9 of the different reports that were specified and required as part of that executive order, and a kind of pulling together of all of that in an interagency process between the White House and the different federal departments and agencies to kind of condense around 7 issues. And I mentioned that interagency process because we'll come back to that in a minute. But basically, it comes down to 7 issues: highlighting, protecting consumers, investors, and businesses, promoting access to safe, affordable financial services, fostering financial stability, advancing responsible innovation, reinforcing the U.S. global financial leadership and competitiveness, fighting illegal finance, and exploring a central bank digital currency. Forgive me for using the notes. And so in many ways, it's restating and reemphasizing the topical headings of the executive order, but with some important distinctions.
Right. So maybe we could talk about, before we get into the distinctions, kind of as an insider and an expert, how, and, when we were chatting last night, you talked about what this means to you or kind of experts in the field, right? And how can we, us mere mortals, how can we decipher this? And what does it mean for us, right? What does it mean for someone like me who's in digital assets? What does it mean for sustainable finance? Is there anything that we can take away and say, God, okay, got it, let's go?
Sure. So I think there's 2 ways to view it. Number 1, what it says, and number 2, what it kind of almost conspicuously doesn't say. So first, you can map the initial 6 areas of emphasis from the executive order to this 7 items in the framework. And when you do that, what you see is, now the original executive order had 6 elements, 3 really focused on things like investor and consumer protection, financial stability, and illegal finance, but the others were about innovation and leadership, technological advances, and financial inclusion. When you see this all mapped to the framework, what you see is an expansion of the concept of enforcement, really an encouragement of not just the CFTC or the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission, but also the Consumer Financial Protection Board, the Federal Trade Commission, and others to really use the full powers of their enforcement authorities against this industry. And really an encouragement across each of these areas for guidance, for regulation, for enforcement as necessary, and for promotion of both US principles of financial regulation out into the world environment, and looking at other aspects of fintech besides digital assets for some of the solutions and issues that were raised.
Let me ask you this. So I hear you talk about the executive order, which, you know, a lot of us read and thought, okay, great. We should do lots of things, right? Let's do something. And then now there's a framework that seems to say, God, we should really do something. And here's the 7 layers of things that we should do. Do you find this disappointing? Were you expecting more?
Well, I was expecting more because in particular, the things that the framework doesn't say. So for example, first and foremost, the framework talks about risks and the reports talk about risks, but really what they're talking about is about threat. Risk is threat and vulnerability and consequence, and hence a sense of proportion. And so buried in the reports are still statements of things like illicit financing is still basically a traditional financial service issue. But yet we're going to spend pages and pages and pages describing the potential for this and the potential for that in our industry. Not that those things don't exist, but the proportionality of it seems out of place. Second, there's no following up from the executive order on the concepts of driving digital assets and Web3 technology into use. So, and not just regulating that which already exists. So there's not really a discussion about federal government usage of this technology, either on its own or paired with the other executive order from the spring focused on zero trust technology and identity. You know, there's a sense of wanting to project U.S. financial values, financial regulatory values on the world, but there isn't a reciprocal sense of what can we learn from the rest of the world. What can the U.S. learn from the EU or from other countries or regions in the world that have really gone deeply into other aspects of regulation of this industry beyond anti-money laundering, where the U.S. has been a leader, and into other areas where the U.S. has lagged. I think 2 other points. One is there's a lot of talk about having regulatory agencies promulgate more rules, do more enforcement. There's very little discussion about harmonization. How is this all supposed to fit together? What about deconfliction? If you go, you see a nod towards the Treasury Department's federal framework to regulate non-bank payment providers, but this is really another effort to push the OCC set of rules, which are very beneficial, but have run into roadblocks of harmonization. And then finally, there's no real accountability other than enforcement for the government. There's no sense of how much investment. There's no sense of how much end products. There's no sense of how much from the Commerce Department report, how much we've promoted U.S. companies into the world. So I think those things surprised me because they're the natural follow-ons from the executive order, and they're diminished or missing in the framework.
That's okay. I'm glad you said that, because that was my takeaway when I was reading it. But at the same time, it is something, right? It is a framework. It was published. Should one feel kind of hopeful that, you know, there was, I don't want to say buzz, but, you know, we've taken another maybe super tiny step toward some regulation, some harmonization, and should everybody in this group kind of go with that, with kind of the knowledge that, you know, maybe the takeaway is, you know, one should know what the rules are, take some from traditional finance, apply them, because you could be subject to enforcement.
No, I think the industry should definitely take away that this issue remains important to the federal government, to the administration. And second, that your voices matter, that your voices are being solicited. Agencies have opened their eyes and their ears to what you have to say. And it's important that you take advantage of those opportunities, because There is a real emphasis on pushing new guidance, new guidelines, new regulations. And third is, it's definitely important for you to think about engaging with these agencies in an effective and proper way, because again, there's a real emphasis here. And in addition to the agencies, with Congress, which is actively considering its own considerations in this area, that have to do with a lot of these subjects. So I think it definitely should be taken as a sign that that digital assets and Web3 are still very much a priority, but it also comes with a note of caution.
Right. And does that, I mean, would it be wrong to say that, it's priority, you just don't really know what to do yet? And therefore, if you're, as you said, right, or as I'm about to say, if you're an opportunist, you wrap yourself in this framework and you walk in and say, here's what I think. And this is how I propose to do certain things.
I think that's right. I would also add one piece from this concept that these are all the products of coordination and negotiation within the executive branch, which is that what this means, what this symbolizes, this framework, all these reports, is an intense amount of discussion among the regulatory agencies, among the different departments and agencies that were charged with developing reports and are described in the framework. And they've had to negotiate with one another over what they're going to say. And so, the framework is kind of the peace treaty. It's the compromise amongst everyone. But it does represent that each agency is kind of feeling out its own authorities. What can it do? What does it want? So it's an opportunity, I think, to talk to the agencies that maybe your companies or entities haven't spoken to before, the CFPB, the FTC. And it's also an effort to say, how can what I'm doing fit within what as many different elements of this framework fit as possible. But third is also, and highly important, to help educate each of these agencies as they lay out in these action plans what they're going to do and what they're going to look at the beneficial working current uses of this technology in production, in use. How does it work? How is it being used? And how is it really benefiting people?
Okay. Maybe to use our last minutes, I wanted to talk about sustainability, right? So this framework to me has just, a laundry. There's something for everyone. You can find yourself in this framework even if you're just nowhere. But if we talk about sustainability, is there more of an opportunity for sustainability, like for, let's say, sustainable finance? Is there more of an in? Is this a new interest? Or is there, I'm just trying to see, is there an angle that people could use to say, like, now you're really focused on, sustainable finance or something like that? Or is it just kind of part of the laundry list?
I think that at the top level, at the framework level, it's kind of part of the laundry list. But if you go underneath one level to the reports that the agencies provided, I think you see some challenges and some opportunities. For example, in the Treasury Department report, you see some kind of renewed skepticism over the digital assets, the ability of digital assets to enhance financial inclusion. So it's a real moment to go back and engage with with those agencies to educate. On the flip side, you see the Commerce Department really advocating for, how can this technology be useful? How can the US government be supportive of its development? And it's a moment to really engage, I think, them and others and try to amplify those voices.
So might the takeaway be find your in because it's there and go for it?
It's definitely there. And, for those who care deeply about the intersection of sustainability and the SDGs with this technology and its potential, it's really a moment to make sure that your voices are heard with the US government, with both the agencies that are named in the White House, as well as with Congress, to make sure that what you're doing, the projects you're working on, the actual impact you're having is really known and understood and can be factored in.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. I think that was it. I hope we've encouraged you to go in and, share. But otherwise, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.